that's the number one thing is people say, why go with a franchise? I could do this myself. And I always say, hey, maybe you could, but it's worth figuring out if you want to, not just doing it because you're afraid of fees. So let's.
You're listening to Ecosysteming, the podcast redefining economic development through the lens of equitable entrepreneurship. Join NC Idea as we engage with entrepreneurs and experts who are challenging the status quo and driving lasting change.
Hello and welcome, listeners and viewers of the Ecosysteming podcast. I am your host, Thom Ruhe. And today, to suggest I'm excited by my guest would be a great understatement. I am joined today by Anna Dey. Anna, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Let me explain why I am so excited. It's because viewers, listeners, we are in the presence of a GOAT in a particular aspect of entrepreneurship that does not get its due recognition. And frankly, it doesn't get as much love as it deserves. And so, of course, for those of you who understand this space very well, I bet you can guess what I'm about to say. She is a master of franchising. And I think for so many people, they just think of people that own franchises as like some other kind of business person, right? I mean, am I right? Have you had that experience?
It's funny. We're all creatures of our own life experiences, right? So I look at people that have their own like independent, businesses as like something like, I'm like, oh my gosh, for me, give me proven systems plans, let me execute. Because gosh, I don't have a creative idea. I'm not recreating the wheel tomorrow, right? So I will admit, I am very impressed by your average entrepreneur that goes out and starts their own concept from scratch. But yeah, very proud to be a franchisee. I'm pretty bullish on it, and I always tell the people when I talk about it, I admit my bias. I say, listen, I'm going to be very biased towards this path towards entrepreneurship. So go seek out other references for because I'll fight my fight, they can fight theirs, and there's a million ways to get it done. But being a creature of my own life experiences, so grateful for franchising. So I'm pretty all in.
Well, let's double click on that. Let me brag about you for a second and share your CV. You opened your first business at the ripe old age of 25. You have been recognized as an award-winning franchisee of at least 3 systems that I can see here: Anytime Fitness, Clean Eatz, and Smoothie King systems. Now, I'm guessing the goGLOW is newer.
Yes.
And probably will be yet another that will add to your accolades. Did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, we've had some really good runs. Been a top system performer in the 3 systems you mentioned, and I've also been a franchisee with a few other systems. So I always kind of joke that the degree of diversification I have pursued is perhaps not the best path for everyone. Even perhaps wasn't the best path for me. There were definitely some overwhelming days, but I got really just hell-bent on my own market. I just kept wanting to double, triple, quadruple down on, East and West Cleveland. And so that's kind of required me to diversify. But yes, it's been a successful run in quite a few different systems at this point.
So we had you brought up East and West Cleveland, so we have to make this disclosure. I mean, we were doing our pre-game banter. As longtime listeners of the Ecosysteming podcast might know, because I may have mentioned it once or twice, maybe, but I call Northeast Ohio my original home. I'm back up. I still have family there, and come to find out, in what is one of those hashtag small world stories.
Small world.
I mean, you're much younger than me, but ostensibly we grew up in the same space, Lake County, Ohio, in that wonderful place that we refer to as the Snow Belt. Of Northeast Ohio. But it's really fertile ground for entrepreneurship, economic development, and economic opportunity, and great ecosystem. Frankly, similar to what we've been building here in North Carolina, where I have taken a lot of the things that I learned and started as one of the founders of Jumpstart, which is a very well-known economic development organization in Northeast Ohio. And frankly, it was the then just beginning out portfolio of Jumpstart that got me recruited up to the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City.
So
And that
cool.
kind of going to the major leagues there and got
Yeah.
to got to do this on a global scale and learn a lot. But
Oh,
it just was so neat when I first saw you on the Ohio Fun podcast. And I was like, oh man, this is kindred spirit. Like we have to get out there. I'm going to say, let me finish just a couple more points on your CV. We'll go back later in this podcast to get on them specifically. But, in addition to being a franchisee, you're also an entrepreneur founder of your own business, franSPOT, right?
yeah.
And where you're teaching and helping people uh, hopefully have a little bit of an easier lift than maybe you did in your first several endeavors.
It's really fun because I think when people think about entrepreneurship, first of all, if they're not open to franchising, it's very intimidating, unless they really do have something incredible, a brainchild that's, they really, really believe in, then so they think, oh gosh, I don't know how I would even get into entrepreneurship, but I do think I have a lot of the skills of an entrepreneur, right? And so franchising can kind of open their eyes to, gosh, I don't need to, come up with something unbelievable or recreate the wheel. I just need to believe in myself as an entrepreneur, someone who can execute a business plan and, hire, manage people, oversee business metrics, be, visible in my community. Things that most of the people that have any leaning towards entrepreneurship already know is in their, skill set, is in their toolbox. And so it's really fun for me to just talk to them, learn about why are you interested in this? It always has to be more than wealth diversification. If all people are looking for is, oh, I want to make some money on my money, it's not the right fit. You have to have some degree of like an entrepreneurial pull. You have to want pride of ownership, fulfillment. These are like the kind of things that you see in any top performing franchisee, and I'm sure any top performing entrepreneur, period. What I think is valuable about what I do that maybe would have been valuable to me if I had had a Anna 2026 when I was Anna 2015, is that, sometimes passion alignment businesses make sense, but sometimes we lean into that. Like I always think, I love fitness, I want to open gym, like just,
Right.
and there's so many business opportunities that aren't necessarily aligned with our hobbies, that can otherwise align perfectly with our goals. So anyway, a lot to kind of talk through with candidates that I work with in this capacity, and it's so much fun. It's a really good fit for me, and I appreciate your kind words because I do think it's helpful to people that haven't done it before. And most of my candidates are way smarter than me and have, like, I work with people that have been at Google for 15 years. I'm like, cool, I don't know anything about what you know about, but hey, I coincidentally, know a lot about this particular lane. So anyways, it's a lot of fun.
Well, it dawns on me like I'm still really haven't finished your full CV. So I'm gonna
Sorry.
click.
Sounds right.
No, that's my fault. I'm gonna click on. You said the passion that you have, right? Because there's one other thing that is classic for successful entrepreneurs, and that's you're also a philanthropist. And
Oh,
I'm sure it's been enabled through your financial success. But you are the director. Is it true to say founder
yes.
of the 24 and 24, where you are
Yeah.
specifically raising money over 3.1 million to date for children battling life-threatening illnesses. That's just, oh my God. It's like the cherry on top of this awesome Sunday that is Anna Dey. And, do you want to give a plug for the 24
Yeah.
and 24?
It's my big, can you see, it's my big tattoo here, 24, 24. I'm branded. Yeah, no, it's the coolest thing ever. It's the coolest thing I'll ever do. It's the coolest thing I've ever done. In 2015, I created it, and it was just this little funny fitness challenge. Back then it was like, I woke up one morning, no, it was like the middle of the night. I woke up and my brain was just going, and I don't know what this says about my brain, but I was like, I wonder if anybody could run a mile every hour on the hour for a day. So it's like only 1 mile at a time. Like, would that be hard? Would that be easy? Cause like, it's just a mile, right? But you do it at noon and then at 1 p.m. and then at 2 p.m. and you keep that going for a calendar day. And I thought it was such an interesting challenge. And, I feel like there's a lot more of that going on now in 2026 with like social media and like just
Yeah.
physical challenges. But back then before the days of Instagram. And, I had never heard of anything like it. So anyways, I challenged a handful of people, and 15 of us did it. We raised $13,000 for a local child battling life-threatening illnesses, because at some point I thought, why the hell would anyone do this if there wasn't some philanthropic cause? So I
Right.
always admit that I stumbled into philanthropy as a result of a weird challenge I came up with. And then the community just really rallied, meaning people came up to me like, that's cool, I want to try it. And people came from different angles. Some were super passionate about the cause. Others were fitness people that wanted to challenge themselves. And then a lot of people kind of in the middle that, just people who were open to doing something hard for the betterment of someone else. And so it grew, it grew, it grew. We had it one year at a professional baseball stadium. We had it at the home of the Cleveland Guardians. So we rented a professional baseball stadium for 48 hours. It was so cool. Anyway, so yeah, now this will be year 12 coming up. And I always joke that the community has forced me to keep it growing. I think a bunch of people would come track me down if I ever said I'm too tired to keep this baby alive. And I've always directed it in a volunteer capacity. It's been the coolest thing. And so, yeah, we'll have our 12th annual event this fall, and we have raised over 3.2 million now since inception.
That's fantastic. And I don't want to disabuse you of your view that you stumbled into this, but I'm old enough to know you can't stumble into your nature. So clearly, you've got altruism hardwired in your DNA. And by the way, love the passion that you brand yourself. I can't
Are you
get the right
branded?
angle. I am. It's more my life saying that I'm trying to live the rest of the years that I might have on this planet. That says, "Blessed are those who plant trees under whose shade they will never sit."
Oh, I saw that on your LinkedIn. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's kind of the ethos of what we do here at NC Idea. But I'm telling you, it's all part of who you are. So, with that being said, I want to jump back up. I think, okay, you're a 2010 University of Toledo graduate. So,
Yep.
that's, people that have graduated from Bowling Green State University, like myself, know that that's the safety school, but that's okay. I won't hold that against you.
As
So,
mentioned, my husband's a BG guy, so no hard feelings on my end, and my twin sister, so
which is,
no hard feelings.
you got Falcons in the family. That's great.
I do.
So let's now in a little bit more seriousness, because again, full disclosure, I chased you down for today's podcast because I saw you on somebody else's podcast, and your um, discipline, for lack of a better word, your methodology of how you got into this and what your expectations are when you start getting into a franchise and how you evaluate something. In particular, a statement you made struck me, and I want to tee this up so that you can expand on it. And that is,
Okay.
you always believe that a strong exit strategy is as important as a market entry strategy.
Mm.
And that's one of those statements said with such conviction that it's not random. All right. This wasn't something AI spit out for you. This is a life lesson hard earned. So I thought I would just tee that up and let you go ahead and expound on that, if you would be so kind.
Yeah. So thanks for that. It- th- Admittedly, I wouldn't have said that when I very, very first got into entrepreneurship, right? Because I had not experienced a successful exit. I didn't really understand what preparing for a successful exit meant. Um, And now I do. And so I have especially when people are looking at the pro formas and they're forecasting, what does my investment look like? What am I investing versus what, am I leveraging in debt to get this business going? And then what does my cash flow look like after debt servicing? What is my inevitable, exit multiplier going to look like? That whole picture has to be taken into consideration when you make an entrepreneurial decision. Now, unless admittedly, your goal is to pass it down generation to generation. And sometimes I have heard that parents that have said, like, hey, my ultimate goal is to create a family business that will stand the test of time. And frankly, maybe we look at different industries specifically with that goal in mind. What is an industry that isn't going anywhere, that isn't in a 5 or 10-year trend cycle? But that's pretty rare. I think typically people think even if my children might be entrepreneurs, they may want to pursue their own endeavor. And maybe I can help them if I have the best exit possible. So yeah, I think that it's really important. And I love exiting. I just sold my 2 Smoothie Kings after 6 years. I had a phenomenal, I was kind of looking at how things were progressing. I made sure that we got the right pieces and parts in place to prepare for that exit, and we had 4 offers, all from other QSR owners, and had a phenomenal exit. So yeah, it's a thrill. It's fun, and then you build something new after you're done.
So Anna, are you telling me that selling, I think you said 3 or is it 2 of your Smoothie Kings?
2, sold 2.
So so you're telling me that exits can be fun?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the probably the hardest part for me about exits is just making sure I do right by my people. So I'm always trying to be transparent, making sure that, we take a look at what that looks like financially. In our first business that we ever sold, we wrote into the offer all of their names and their pay rates and like requirements that, things had to stay consistent with our buyer. And each time I've sold, I've been a little bit more aware of the best ways to just basically take care of our people, because that's the one thing is, which aligns of course with, I think, the ecosystem systeming, is that right, ecosysteming
Yep.
podcast, just I'm a big people person. I'm very aware when I have successful businesses, how much I who is helping me do that, and it's my people on the ground. And so that's the only challenging part. But like for our Smoothie Kings, I presented my leaders with a few options. We had different job opportunities for them at our other businesses. If they wanted to stay with us, we would honor, their pay structure, things of that nature, their PTO, whatever they had, their 401k, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or I had pre-negotiated opportunities with our buyer. And so I just wanted, and then, also make sure they had a nice little bonus exit when we sold. And so they ended up deciding to stay with us and pivoting to us. But I also was transparent with my buyer about that. I wanted to make sure they gave my buyer enough notice. So I'm big on communication, healthy communication between my existing team and my buyer. I want my buyer to be successful. I want my leaders to be successful. I want to be successful. So that's probably and I still think that's fun, but that's the one thing that I tread carefully on when it comes to sale. I'm not just a exit, peace out. I want to keep this seas as calm as I possibly can for all parties involved and take care of anyone who's helped me, get there. But we've been successful in doing that. And so then in that case, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love selling.
It's interesting you bring that up and how you negotiate for your key operators in any
Yes.
particular franchise. And, for other entrepreneurs that have done startups that have been acquired, right? It's not uncommon to have a provision where you stick around for a year or two, and some percentage of the acquisition can be withheld for kind of like, hey, we want you to hang around and help transition everything and smooth everything over with the troops. And then, maybe it's as much as 10%. And then there's that like little kicker at the end. Is it something like that? Or is it more like you just said, it's just wired into the purchase agreement?
Yeah, I think I've experienced a few different scenarios. With my Anytime Fitness, they kept me on as a contractor and I was compensated in that capacity for 12 months. Treading carefully here. I was not overwhelmingly pleased with the direction my buyers went. I felt like it did contradict a bit of what they'd kind of quote unquote promised in their, in the process. And so actually after about 6 months, I said, I would prefer to not, we'll cut the agreement. You don't have to pay me another penny, but I don't think I want to stay in the role just because it's getting harder to be a contracted employee when you're not listening to the way that we have been as successful as we have been, which was labor, people heavy, things like that, right? So everybody runs a business differently. So that's one challenge, I think, if you're going to stay on with a buyer. And let me admit, maybe, it's my way or the highway. That's probably some degree of that inside of me, where it's like, oh, you're not doing it the way I think is best, so they probably were happy to split ways. But so, yeah, I mean, I'm, in a sale, I'm always open to that. For the particular sale I just exited, I just made sure that they trained with us for 6 weeks. I made sure my 2 leaders that were coming with me stayed for 2 weeks after the sale just to completely get them as best set up as possible. So many different variables to negotiate. Certainly depends on every deal. And to your point, key players, I think in, franchising being inherently, copy paste is oversimplifying it, right? But in franchising, you have the franchisor, you have your franchise business coach from the franchisor, you have the corporate staff, right? So perhaps different than an independent acquisition. There is going to be a lot of support you receive outside of your seller's support, right? So I think it may be a little bit less common to do a lot of this in a franchise sale, but I'm always open to the conversation when I'm ready to sell a unit or a couple units. How can we best take care of all parties in this?
You've also owned a bar, and restaurants are a little different. And I'm not talking about fast casual. I'm talking like where people are going for an experience. And an owner proprietor can be part of the brand experience, for patrons that are going there. Like, hey man, Anna's there, right? And I can see her kind of the general on the field. Like, right, she's behind the bar for a while. She's in the kitchen, checking orders. She's greeting, regulars that are coming out. Is that a little harder to extricate yourself from when you sell that, or you want to? Or, I mean, I almost wonder if it's kind of like a factor in the valuation, right? Like, oh, you can only hang around for like 3 months after this, then.
Yeah. It depends. So, great question and fair. The first business I ever sold, I was a full-time owner operator of for 7 years. I poured my heart and soul into it. I was training clients at 5 a.m, work in the office all day, every day, training group classes at night, and I was at 5Ks every weekend with our running team, cheering them on. Right. So that. Oh my gosh, yes. I had a very, for a buyer, that should have been a heavy concern of our buyer, frankly. But thereafter, I recognized, to your point, that the seller cannot be overwhelmingly involved if you have any intention of inevitably exiting and you expect to get as good of a multiplier, right? So
Right.
I have come up with a strategy that works really well, and at least for me. And it's not overwhelmingly impressive. So let me just warn you, you're not going to be blown away by my
Oh,
hard work
stop.
here. But I work in each business at least once every other week. So, for example, for my Smoothie Kings, I would work at 1 from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Saturday, the first Saturday of the month, and then I would work at my other one the next Saturday. And so yesterday was Sunday. I was at my Clean Eats in Menor. I worked the shift selling prepackaged meal plans to all of our customers. Loved it. Had a great FaceTime with my customers. And then next Sunday, I'll be at my other location. It's a high enough frequency for people to say they've met the owner, they've seen the owner, right? To engage with the owner. It's a high enough frequency to see that the store is clean, to get guest feedback. People will call. I had someone yesterday who said, I've been doing this for a month. I absolutely love it. Your team is so helpful and lovely. And it's like, oh, thank you. Great to hear, right? It's a high enough frequency to hear from your customers if, God forbid, something's going awry, to see that everything's working, right? I'm using the equipment. I'm aware that there's no issues. But it's a small enough frequency that it's proof that my presence there is not an operational need, right? If I want to go on a trip
Right.
and I'm gone for a Saturday, Sunday, my team has people that work those days, the other Saturdays and Sundays that I'm not there. So it's sometimes I feel a little bit embarrassed by what a low frequency it is. Oh, two shifts a month. But again, it's just high enough for me. It's been my secret sauce because I am also a franchise consultant, and that's wildly turned into a full-time gig. It was supposed to be like a fun thing I did on the side, and now I have an office, and but I've really enjoyed that. So it's a high enough frequency for me to your point, my environment to know, oh, we know the owner, and I do other things in the form of grassroots marketing and use myself on some digital marketing efforts to ensure that my community knows, even though these are franchise brands, they are locally owned and operated. The money we spend here stays in our local economy. These are our people, right? And so I think that's important without being the manager. And frankly, if you choose to be the manager, the operator, it's also impossible to scale, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I could have never opened a second franchise the way I ran my first one. I was all in, right? And so there's a few different variables there. But yeah, when to the degree I've gotten it to, I do not think that my relevance, or that I am overwhelmingly relevant from a standpoint of the exit price and valuation.
If you indulge, one quick nerdy question on the exit side multiple, are you talking gross rev or net income?
Net income. So yeah,
Okay, so
typically
it's
it's
always
going to be.
net.
Yeah, but but you also I feel like a lot of people don't know their true net because it depends on, are you paying yourself W-2? And if so, is the amount of time you're putting in what a buyer would have to put in from a standpoint of a manager? Is
Right.
the rate you're paying yourself aligned? So usually you can clean up your P&L a bit to get it to an accurate net from a
Yep.
standpoint of actual valuation. But yeah.
Yeah, as always, yet another brilliant thing you just dropped in there, because I get this all the time with the people that somebody will come in and I know they're struggling and I know they're doing, 80-hour weeks, and they'll say, "Hey, we finally hit break even." And I can always debunk it with the first question: "Are you paying yourself yet?"
Right. Oh,
I'm like, you're not paying yourself, you're not at break even, right?
right.
Because free
Right.
labor is not a feasible economic model.
Right.
And somehow they think they can make it up by working harder. And I don't mean to be rude on that. I mean, I've been there, I've done that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I put myself at financial risk, like, personally guaranteeing multi-million-dollar lines of credit and extending myself
Oh,
out like that. And it's, oh man, you want to talk about things you had to learn the hard way. I could write a book. So I tell you what, let's get over to the franSPOT side of the business, which kind of sounded like yet another way to give back, like a personal itch you wanted to scratch.
yeah.
So I got to be true to my word and treat you like a founder here now. And so ask you this, because I've been on the site, and it's very clear, like, oh, and it costs you nothing. Just fill in the
Yeah.
form. So, Miss Anna, how do you monetize, franSPOT if you're
Oh,
not
it's my
charging people for it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always touch on it because I like to be the reason I love being a franchise consultant is this exact reason. There's literally no ask of the people I work with. And if I had to go out in the world and sell at this point, like I'd rather just go sell smoothies or sell meals or sell fitness classes or sell spray tans, which is what I do at my goGLOW franchise. I just don't love the idea of going out and trying to quote unquote sell myself. And so I don't have to do that in franchise consulting, like because I am compensated exclusively by my franchisor partners. So essentially, I meet with someone and I learn about their goals, their background, their financial qualifications, their budget. A lot of times they have no idea what their budget is because if you haven't opened a business yet, you don't really know what is appropriate, right? So we talk through all of that. And I represent hundreds of franchise companies. So what I do is listen and learn. And then I go on the back end and look at their market. What's viable in this market? What does that population density look like? What does the average household income look like? What does the education look like? And then what do the brands that candidate is interested in? What are they looking for in a market? Is this market viable for them? And then we look at financial qualifications and budget. And what I do is kind of like perfect, it's matchmaking, right? So it's like, okay, they
I
want
was waiting for you to
XYZ.
say those words, like, it's a
Yeah, it
dating
kind of, and
service.
so it's sort of, yeah. And so then I'll present concepts. A couple are obvious, like I like, I've always wanted to open a restaurant. Okay, here's a restaurant, right? A couple are going to be less obvious. Like here's things that you may not have thought of, but they otherwise align. And I encourage you to learn a little bit. And it's a fun process because man, sometimes people think they want X, they really want Y. Sometimes we hit, it's a home run and the one that we thought was great is the one that works. And then I'm their third party advocate throughout their diligence process. So when they want to understand what the heck is this scary 250-page document called an FDD, franchise disclosure document, what steps are in this diligence process? What questions should I be asking existing franchisees so that I make sure I uncover as much information as I can to see if this is a good fit for me? And one thing I love, like I joke, this is my fun job, and luckily my businesses support my lifestyle and my income and I love them. And so this is something where, I just have no motivation to encourage people to make choices that aren't in their best interest. And so I play a lot of devil's advocate. I'm like, all right, Thom, I'm going to tell you why you should only buy one license, and I'm going to tell you why you should definitely buy three. And, then you tell me which one landed harder for you. Because I can play both sides of almost everything that
Sure you
comes to
can.
this decision. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. And then long answer to your question. If I present a candidate to a brand, it's the right fit. They go through a 4 to 6 to 8 week diligence process. They sign a franchise agreement. That brand says, Anna, hell yeah, thanks for bringing us Thom. He's great. And they commission me. So I'm compensated, but just never by my candidate. And then the last thing I love about it is that my candidate doesn't pay a penny more than had they gone direct to the franchisor.
Right.
So fee structure is identical. So to them, I always joke with my candidates. I'm like, as long as you don't mind hanging out with me, it's a no-brainer to work with me. But if you do mind hanging out with me, then maybe don't.
Yeah, and I could
Hopefully,
see you. Well, I'm sure everybody enjoys hanging out with you, but
I
I
don't
think
know.
to the franchisor, it's a commission well spent
Right,
because you're doing all the pre-qualification, right? And
right,
they don't want to risk have reputational risk that people that don't understand what they're getting into, you know, buys a franchise, or I don't know if that's the right term, but they get affiliated with the brand and then they're
right,
unsuccessful, right? Because you make somebody happy, they'll tell two people. You piss somebody off, they'll tell 200 people, and
right.
that's just a reality of that, and that's worth a lot to, especially to the bigger the brand.
There's a couple big conferences a year, and brands are like, please, franchise consultants, we choose us, pick us, learn about us, we're great. And they wouldn't be that way if they weren't eager to receive consultant pre-qualified candidates. And to your point, the exact reason they're eager is, out of hundreds of brands, the consultant thought we were a good fit for this candidate. This means we're a good fit for this candidate, right? So, imagine how many people just fill out inquiry forms for fun, and so they get kind of to jump close to the finish line with a candidate that has been perfectly matched to their brand and what they offer. So, anyways, it's a cool industry. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. So, works well for all parties, in my opinion.
So let me wrap up the kind of franchising geek part of the pod by asking, like, what is the single biggest misconception? Like, what's the what's the question or the mistake that you've answered 1,000 times, if not more?
Easily. The number one issue is fee structure, right? They look at franchising and say, what do you mean I'm going to pay, this percent of my revenue in royalties, or this percent in advertising fee structure, or whatever every franchisor's fee structure is. And this is always the time where I admit my bias, right? I say, listen, right now I'm going to go hard on why that's a silly concern, but then go seek out other resources I don't want to be your end all be all, because
Right.
I never encourage people to limit the amount of mentors and the amount of, education they get on a topic. But so often, you immediately recoup your royalty percent with group buy opportunities, i.e., your cost of goods have been negotiated at a much lower price than a mom and pop is paying because you have the buying power of a national system, right? Boom, right there. You recoup 4%, based on your payment processing rates. If you have a national business that's negotiating with your payment processing company, think about how many people pay with credit cards, right? So if you're even getting a 0.5% knocked off your payment processing rate, or even less than that, how that scales on $1 million business over a year versus that royalty you pay, right? And then we think about just the speed to operation, right? If you're creating a business from scratch, what is my business? What do I sell? What is my branding? What are my differentiators? Who are my vendors? Who am I using for marketing, for payment processing, for loyalty? All of that's done for you. So even the fact that you can immediately plug and play and start opening your second, third, fourth locations, if that's a good fit for you, in the time that you would have just been trying to establish what you are and what you do, that's a huge thing. So again, admitting my bias, like, I'll pay royalties all day. Sure. Hell yeah. 7%, take it. Think about how minuscule 7% is from a standpoint of how professional you look to a customer base when you have what a lot of franchisors bring to the table. Like, am I paying $100 or $107 for a service or a product? As a consumer, that's not going to be an overwhelming difference. But even if both are 100, I still, at that 7% royalty, could be bringing more cash flow to the bottom line based on other cost savings my franchisor offered me. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. As you can tell, I could go on and on, but that's the number one thing is people say, why go with a franchise? I could do this myself. And I always say, hey, maybe you could, but it's worth figuring out if you want to, not just doing it because you're afraid of fees. So let's not do it. We don't want to lead defensively. I'm going to open my own business because I don't want to pay anyone fees. Let's look at the value the franchisor brings. Let's look at your skill sets, your creativity or lack thereof, your idea or lack thereof, your experience or lack thereof. And then let's zoom in on whether this is a good fit, not just leading with that defensive, like, oh, I don't want to pay you, 1% of my revenue in a brand fund fee or whatever it is. So
Right.
that's by far the number one. And I'm happy to unpack it. And sometimes it isn't the right fit. Most of the time it's a pretty good amount of like just naivety to what those fees really help a franchisee do.
We have similar conversations, albeit from a different standpoint. It's the dilution conversation when a founder we're helping is starting to do the private equity raise,
Uh,
and they realize they have to give up a percent of the company, right? And this could have been their baby for the last dozen
right.
years, and they're kind of stuck, right? They have it's not quite a lifestyle business. Maybe they have 2, 3 employees, but like they've clearly on their own hit a ceiling. And so now the question is, if I raise money so that I can kind of invest in, market acquisition type activities, I'm going to have to give
Yeah.
something up. And invariably, somebody that's done it once or twice, they get it, and there's no
Yeah.
conversation. Like they just get it. And it's no guarantees either. But when it's somebody that's kind of new to the concept, I call it I have to have the cookie talk. And
Right.
you probably know where I'm going with this, right? Like, okay, you got this business, and think of it as a cookie. And right now it's a cookie this big. And maybe you want to keep that cookie that big for the rest of your life. Nothing wrong with that. There's
Right.
nothing that says you have to aspire to make a ginormous cookie. However, if you do want to make your cookie bigger, right, and
Yeah.
you do raise private equity, yeah, you're not going to own 100% of that cookie anymore. But owning, you know, 70% of a cookie that's this big is more than 100% of a cookie that's this big. And if the goal is to have more gosh darn cookie,
Yeah.
maybe you consider it.
And the whole idea of that, I love what you said, like, maybe that is what you want. Maybe you want 100% of a smaller cookie. And like, I just like to give people permission, like, that's fair.
Yeah.
Maybe what you want is a smaller business that you own entirely. Maybe what you want is your own baby. I just worked with someone who was thinking about franchising, and she was like, I just love she has a music concept. She's like, I just love my business with as it is. I don't think I want to switch to a franchise model. And I said, that's fair. What you really need to understand is, what are my goals and ambitions? They don't have to be the same as everyone else's. And we talk about that a lot with franchising, because franchising is, in theory, inherently copy paste, right? So most franchisees are scaling. They have 3, 5, 10 units, right? And I always remind franchisees, like, if what you want is a business in your community, and you want to be engaged in that business, you want to build relationships with your community, you can make a lot of money out of one location. You don't have to get on the scale or nothing train, but then you have the one cookie, right? So it's just it's cool. It's about not assuming that every entrepreneur out there has the same goals. And when we recognize that, we can figure out what the best strategy is based on actually learning about them and what they want, because we don't all want the same things.
So Christian's giving me the card that says 5-minute warning. So I got to land this plane, but I got to ask this question. Again, one of the things I assumed, and I could be way off on that, but one of the reasons I think you're unique more so than most in this space is that you had multiple. You didn't have 12 Smoothie Kings. You had
Mm.
other, right? You had the Anytime Fitness, the Clean Eats, the Smoothie King, the goGLOW now. The bar you had in Willoughby there on 3rd and Vine. Like,
Yep.
of the people you work with, I just assume most people just stick with one system. Do a lot of them do these different systems like you have done?
It comes up a lot, and I kind of always make fun of myself at this juncture, because frankly, diversifying into 7 different concepts, which is where I was at, plus my charity event, which is pretty significant amount of time. So we'll say 8 concepts, is psychotic. Like,
Okay.
do not recommend. It's crazy. It's a longer conversation. How I always joke, it's kind of how the cookie crumbled. Like, but when we talk about diversification, when we talk about making decisions in franchising, I talk about the benefits of width and the benefits of depth. The benefits of width: build one relationship, whether that be with an individual or a community at large, and earn their dollars twice, right? So I only had to meet Thom once. Tom's the best. Tom says, you know, Anna, you seem cool. I'd like to support what you got going on. So Tom comes to my gym and he shops at my restaurant, or he goes to my whatever it is, right? So I've earned his that he goes to my bar on the weekends, my gym on the weekdays. He's, you know, so and I only had to, you know, marketing is so valuable, right? So I only had to earn that
Sure.
relationship once. Those are some of the benefits of diversifying in width. More concepts, one market. And I think it's smart to do that twice, maybe 3 times, depending on the individual, depending on their bandwidth, depending on their priorities, okay? The degree I did, again, hilariously psychotic. Don't recommend. But then there are a lot of benefits to choosing a model that you like, that you believe in the leadership of, that you understand, and scaling in depth. So one model, one concept, one franchise brand in this example, and owning out the Cleveland market, having 3 on the west side, 3 on the east side, 2 south in Akron Canton market. You know, that is a really great play. Scaling is so much easier. You can staff share. You can build true infrastructure with a regional manager who oversees your store level managers, right? You can train at your existing locations and deploy staff to future locations. There's just so much that goes into this. And actually, Tom, I'm opening 2 more Clean Eatz's. I haven't really announced it yet, so I'm sure this is
Making
huge,
news on the
huge
Ecosysteming
newsworthy,
podcast.
huge newsworthy mention. But so we're opening in Strongsville and Solon, and it's largely because, honestly, I've decided I had a great 15 years of craziness building out this way. I had some extremely strong exits. I also had some not so great exits. I've learned a lot. Luckily, I've always exited, though. I've never had to close a business. I've always been able to successfully sell if and when I chose to. But anyways, I've decided to kind of shift into a 2-unit of ownership and build in depth because width has been hard. I don't regret it. I've learned a lot. I poured into my Cleveland community and I've been successful as a result of that. But it goes back to, what do you want? What makes sense for you? What degree of bandwidth do you have? A lot to unpack there on the smartest path forward. And they both can make sense. And the last thing I want to mention, you said you don't know of a lot of franchisees that have done multiple concepts. It's actually more common than you'd think, because when people learn franchising, they kind of get the itch and
Oh, yeah.
they want to diversify. So I've actually placed, I checked a while ago. I placed over a dozen existing franchisees in a secondary concept that has synergy with their initial concept, or at least with their market. So it's pretty common, just not to the degree that I had done it.
Listen, I do have to wrap it up, but I can't wrap it up without saying one other thing, one bona fide on how much of a badass you are. You and I were speaking before the cameras were rolling about your commitment to physical fitness, and my daughter being a CrossFit person and yes, and competing nationally. But well, none of my kids are married, but even my daughter, I doubt, would get married on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa after a 6-day climb. And so that had to be planned, which meant you were packing. You know, I'm sure you weren't like, it wasn't like you were bringing cases of champagne for 300 guests up at the top of the mountain, but do a 6-day climb just to do your nuptials. That's pretty badass.
It's so, thanks. You know what, Tom, you're my favorite ever. That's so cool of you to bring that up. Yeah, there's a funny joke. Before my husband and I got engaged, I said, I'm like, you know, I don't really think I want like a traditional wedding. Like, I've never really, you know, had any, I don't know, I just never really pictured that. I'm like, wouldn't it be badass if we just like climbed a mountain instead? And he's like, what? No, you're crazy. Like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, all right, work in progress. And then we joke, sure enough, we climbed a mountain and got married. So I must have done something right. But yeah, he came around to it, probably because I was like, no, it's going to be cool. And we ended up, I mean, it was such a cool experience. We did it together. There was like hard moments. We bonded. It was cool. We made it. And we had, we got bone rings in Africa that we exchanged at the top. It was just the coolest thing ever, and a great way to start our marriage. And yeah, so thanks. It's been now 12 years, so I kind of forget about this cool thing. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, there's something aptly metaphoric about entrepreneurship and climbing mountains, and I can't think of a better way to end what has been a great podcast. Thank you so much for being so kind with your time, your energy, and your wisdom. And if I can ever return the favor, just let me know. Any excuse to come up to Northeast Ohio is always
Come on up.
welcome. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was so fun. I appreciate you having me on.